Hello everyone. You join us for our next entry in Armored Core August, covering Armored Core Formula Front, the 10th entry in the series for the Sony PlayStation Portable, and with one version on PS2. But before we begin the video, I'd like to thank HaloOwl once again for his lovely thumbnails. They really do look fantastic. I'd also like to ask y'all for support on the content with a like, subscribe for more, and comment down below so far your thoughts on the series as well as the franchise. Now let's dive into the story and development, shall we? In Armored Core Formula Front, you play as a newly admitted architect to the Formula Front Armored Core Combat Leagues. It is up to you and your team of unmanned armored cores to make it to the top of the leagues. As you climb the ladder, you'll make rivalries and be challenged and challenge numerous foes. Honestly, there isn't a whole lot of story to cover, as it's a handheld focused spin-off that focus almost entirely on its weird-ass mechanics. Released in Japan in 2004 and America in 2005, this game completely shifts the gameplay style of Armored Core on its head, instead placing you in the role of a designer of mechs and choosing their layouts and builds for 1v1 arenas. Formula Front was originally a PSP exclusive, but in November 2005, a modified release of the game, which was then intended for the American audiences, but was only released in Japan for the PS2. What's funny is this version's almost entirely in English and Japanese text outside of the tutorial mode, so if you own it, you could switch between the two and play the game on a more comfortable home console. It also includes a large amount of bonus content and extra battles not featured in the later released American PSP version, likely due to the PS2 version being able to accommodate more space compared to a much smaller UMD. Now, the US American version does have one thing the Japanese version does not though, that being manual control options for the arena fights, instead of it being AI only, which for better or worse depending on personal preference can be a good thing. Story-wise, there's also much less of a focus on corporate backstabbing and shady political dealing, for a larger focus on metal mecha sports violence, and all the drama that enters. Now let's dive into the gameplay, shall we? Gameplay-wise, depending on whichever version of the game you're playing, can vary drastically. As with the North American release of the game, you have the option to completely ignore the unique concept of the game and instead play it like a weirdly controlled arena ladder climb. Though the controls can be quite a pain, being notoriously difficult to use amongst fans of the series. Another departure from the series is that you have access to all 480 parts from the start of the game, with no cost for any parts at all. You also have 5 mechs that you can customize to have ready to go mechs to throw at any different situation without having to go back to the garage and fine tune. Though once a part's used on one mech, it cannot be used on any other build unless it's equipped from the mech it's currently attached to, which I assume is to encourage a diverse variety of builds, so you don't just make 5 super heavy mechs with various super weapons attached to them. Now, the other major change in the game, which is the primary form of gameplay if you're not playing the US version, being the AI creation function. First, we'll start with base character, which is what your general AI focuses on. You choose on several sliding scales, which will determine how your mech will generally react in any given situation, though these factors are further refined and changed based on the performance screen. On this screen, you're assigned a certain amount of points to fine-tune your mech's reaction and playstyle, which the points are based off of whichever head you choose to attach to this particular mech, as each head only has so much capacity it can handle, and overloading the points will negatively affect your mech's performance. Another new condition of mech creation is part tuning, which you have 10 points per part, though this doesn't apply to every part, which lets you fine-tune that piece in a variety of different ways based on what the part is, such as generator tuning lets you increase a part's capacity, or how fast it regenerates energy, or how heavy the part itself is, letting you squeeze a little bit more weight on your mech to fit different niches. Otherwise, customization is pretty similar to other entries in the series, just with even more variety to fit different styles, and the emblem paint creation processes are also similar to the other entries, so there's not too much to discuss here. There is now a new system which will report on various events going on, such as certain mechs pushing higher up in the arena or discussing rules and regulations for the sport, as well as the traditional mail system, as you get mail from different competitors and companies and such. Honestly though, of all the games I've covered so far, this is probably my least favorite, as even though there's the option to control the mech by hand, it feels clunky and uncomfortable. And unlike the PS1 games, it's faster paced and even harder to get used to on the small system and its tiny stick. And oftentimes the AI mode isn't much better, as it can be quite dumb at times. I mean, the very first time I tried the AI mode, my mech immediately left the arena and lost the match by default, which while hilarious was also a pain in my ass. It takes a while to wrap your head around the AI, and when you do seem to understand it, the fights often feel much more luck-based as the two fight it out. And that's another issue. If you're playing the game how it's intended, you're not even controlling the mechs. It's entirely just setting up the mechs for each match, tuning their AI, and then watching the two mechs fight it out. Is it interesting? Sure, but it's definitely not the most fun thing to play, and it really misses a major point of the series. Sure, we like to customize the mechs to suit our taste, but we also want to do the fighting. It's not as fun to watch our mech's AI go out and do all the work for us. But if you do decide to control the show, it's slow, it's clunky, and oftentimes it's a real pain in the ass to secure the win. It's definitely a unique entry in the series, but it's definitely better that this was a spin-off and not a mainline title, as a lot of fans would definitely be disappointed by it. Now let's cover the presentation and performance, shall we? This is one area I will say is actually pretty nice. Visually, the series looks pretty good for a PSP game. It's not as good as, say, Armored Core 3 for the PS2, but it's definitely nicer than Armored Core 1 for the PS1. The graphics are crisp, the art style's pretty nice, and the soundtrack's pretty bumpin'. It's definitely in line for a lot of the older Armored Core tracks with its fun, fast-paced electronic style. Now, the AI mode is definitely visually flashy. It's very cool to watch the mechs duke it out as they try to outsmart and outpace one another and bring each other down. But what it has in Flash, it loses in interactivity, as watching your mechs duke it out is only so fun for so long, before you get bored of just making mechs and fucking with their AI. Performance-wise, it's pretty stable, though the small screen gets a bit annoying, so I'd recommend if you're playing on an actual PSP, make sure it's a 2000 or 3000 model, so you can connect a set of component cables and enjoy the action in a larger, more stylish view, as well as making it easier to read everything. Load times are okay, they're not super long, but not particularly quick either. About standard for this era, really. Honestly, there isn't that much to say in this regard. It's not bad looking, but it doesn't look as good as, say, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker on the system. It's flashy and stylish, but that style wears off quickly just watching it. Let's move on to the conclusion, shall we? Honestly, it's both easy and difficult to recommend this game. Easy because it's one of the cheapest and least sought after entries in the series, which makes it affordable for the common gamer, but it's also not the most engaging and fun game in the series, with its lackluster story and gameplay that can either be unique and interesting, but eventually dull, or clunky and annoying if you choose the manual way due to the fact that the controls just aren't meant for a PSP. And unfortunately, the Japanese PS2 version, released before the American version, doesn't have the option for manual controls, which that version it'd be perfect for, as you could have used the better refined controls brought in by later entries in the series. But we can't just spend all day daydreaming of what could have been, can we? I do find it funny though, if you do manage to master the controls of the game, you can essentially entirely invalidate the primary purpose of the game. But you're doing this in favor of swapping dull gameplay for frustrating gameplay. Personally, I'd only recommend this game for hardcore collectors of the series and those looking to flesh out their PSP library, as the game's not offensively bad, but it's not standout good either. I doubt I'll replay this entry for quite a while, and honestly for the price, you'd be better off grabbing Armored Core 2 or 3 and enjoying the better gameplay and style. But I think that's just about wraps up this video. Be sure to support HaloOwl's lovely artwork, as it's always fantastic. I'd like to thank each and every member seen on the screen, as y'all's support really does help make things like this possible. This has been Core, and I'll see y'all on the next entry on our list, that being Armored Core Last Raven for the PS2.